You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove. For all the latest Buckeyes news, analysis, reaction, and the best Ohio State community on the entire internet, head over to BuckeyeGrove.com or follow us on Twitter at Ohio State Rivals. Without any further delay, it's time to get unscripted, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Mom! Can we get some meatloaf?
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Mom! The meatloaf!
All right, so here's the deal on that one. And if I ever see any of you guys tweet, do you think that we as DB coaches sit there and say, don't look back for the ball? Like, my wife used to come up to me after games and be like, hey, why don't our guys turn back and look for the ball? I'm like, do you want to see my individual tape? All we do is practice turning and looking for the ball. DB coaches teach to turn and look for the football. We promise you we will practice to teach. This is awesome that you asked this, because now no one can tweet this out or say this. We are going to work on turning and looking and trying to intercept the football when we're in man. Now, there's certain parts of the field where it's not good to do that. So if we don't do it in a game, it might be a certain part of the field. But I promise you, come and watch individual. We'll turn and look for the ball.
That was Jeff Hafley you just listened to there at the Open. He is, of course, the new assistant defensive coordinator and defensive backs coach for The Ohio State University, coming to the Buckeyes from the San Francisco 49ers, where he was the defensive backs coach. Good Friday, everybody. Welcome back to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast. I am Kyle Lamb, and I am your host. We are brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com. It was a kind of busy week. Late signing period came and went for Ohio State and all of college football. Ohio State landed 2 out of their primary 3 offensive line targets, and for that matter, not just offensive line targets, but 2 out of the only 3 targets that they really had remaining left in the class. DeJuan Jones and Inoke Biamahi both signed with the Buckeyes, whereas Doug Nestor, as expected, signed with Virginia Tech. I will talk a little bit about the Mahi situation specifically. As you probably know, he is from Hawaii, and he is enrolling at Ohio State this fall, but he is not going to be around long. He is going to be going on a 2-year Mormon mission. He is, of course, of the Latter-day Saints faith. So we'll get into that later in the show. Of course, you heard Jeff Hafley at the top. I'd like to talk about him later in the show, too, because he really knocked it out of the park. Justin Fields knocked it out of the park, too. They both spoke at signing day in kind of an overall media session that Ryan Day and company had over at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center this week. So I've got some audio later on that I want to share, some more audio with Hafley, and then talk a little bit about Fields, because they both, I thought, were really, really impressive in their first speaking opportunities and engagements for Ohio State as Buckeyes, as player and coach. So we'll get into that a little bit. But, I want to start with what I thought was the most interesting thing that came out of the press conference the other day. So Ryan Day, of course, had a 45-minute speaking session talking about recruiting and the new coaching staff and where everything is at with the program. And I thought the most interesting thing that he said when talking about Greg Madison, the new defensive coordinator, and Al Washington, the new linebackers coach, both coming to Ohio State from the program up north. It was really interesting because Day shared the insight that he actually called Jim Harbaugh directly to get permission to speak with both of those gentlemen. And I don't know about you, but that had to be an awkward conversation, because in the back of your mind, if you're Ryan Day, does it really matter what Jim Harbaugh says? Look, I'm trying to picture myself as a fly on the wall in that kind of conversation, because I'm curious, what does Jim Harbaugh say? Does he say, no, I don't want you to? Does he say, yeah, go ahead, you have my blessing? And in the back of mind, when he's saying that, he's probably laughing at himself more than he does on a normal basis, because I'm sure he laughs at himself every day. I mean, I would if I'm Jim Harbaugh. But, I mean, you're probably thinking, yeah, you can try. You're not taking our guys, especially Washington. I mean, I know that Greg Madison said that he took this opportunity because he wanted to be a defensive coordinator, and that's something that Jim Harbaugh wasn't going to be able to accommodate him to do that. But, even saying that, and even if in the back of his mind, Harbaugh is maybe okay with Madison at this point in his career leaving, I'm sure he doesn't want it, A, to be to Ohio State, and B, you're probably still thinking there's no way Madison, who's been a coach at Michigan for 13 years, is taking that job. He might take the call, but he's not taking the job. I'm sure that's the way Harbaugh thinks, and especially out Washington. I mean, even if they're okay with Madison leaving, maybe not okay with leaving to Ohio State, but leaving in general, there's no way they wanted Al Washington to walk out that door, especially to Ohio State. He was their best recruiter. He's the only thing that really had them in the running for Zach Harrison to begin with. And so, I just can't. I'm trying to fathom what's going through Jim Harbaugh's mind, because he's not expecting there's any way Ohio State's going to land one or both. But, at the same time, what do you say? Do you say, you got my blessing? And if he says, no, I'm really not crazy about you talking to my guys, does Day do it anyway? That's a really fascinating conversation. I wish Day had given the details exactly of what Jim Harbaugh said and how he said it, because that would be as interesting as a result. I think that was a really savage thing to do with Ryan Day. And I'm not saying that he meant it this way, but it really was savage, because that no matter what Day intended in the back of his mind, he was making those calls no matter what Jim Harbaugh had to say. I thought that's really interesting. And I think that really adds some spice to the rivalry. I mean, outwardly, that was the gentlemanly thing to do. That's a classy thing to do. But there's kind of that swagger that goes with it. That Ryan Day is just kind of making a point. I kind of take it that way too. I think in the back of his mind, as much as he's trying to appear classy, I also think it's almost like, hey, guess what? This is kind of like me coming at your guys. I'm coming for you. I'm taking some of your best coaches, and they're coming down to Ohio State with me. So that's how I took that. I mean, look, I think there was a part of Brian that was being classy there, but that was a savage thing to do. So Ohio State, late signing period, 2 for 3 on the week. They got DeJuan Jones from Indianapolis. They got Enoke Viamahi from Hawaii, and they lost out on Doug Nestor. They also are still reportedly in the running for Jonah Jackson. He's a grad transfer, center/guard from Rutgers. Appears to be a guy that Ohio State really likes a lot. One of the better grad transfer options on the market in college football. He's interested in Ohio State. He's interested in Oklahoma. We'll see what happens with him. He's finishing out the semester at Rutgers, so he's not going to be around for spring football. We probably won't know anything on him, potentially for weeks, maybe even months. But he is apparently still a target that's out there for Ohio State. But the one that Ohio State really needed the most, Viamahi. So here's the situation. He is going to enroll at Ohio State, and he's going to be there this fall. The catch is he will be there for all of one semester, and so he's going to have just enough time to get integrated with Ohio State. He'll be around for a football season. He'll go through every day at practice. Being a true freshman, despite the depth concerns, I'm not expecting him to get into the rotation, much less earn a starting spot, but he'll get his taste of college football. He'll get his feet wet, get out there knee deep, get to feel around, honestly get used to the temperature a little bit. And then at the end of the semester, he's going to go off on his 2-year mission. And so a lot of people have asked what that means. Basically, it means this, is he's going to be gone for 2 years, and in that time, Ohio State will not have to count him on the roster. They will not have to count him towards their scholarship limit. He will not be on scholarship, so therefore he will not count against the limit while he's gone. The interesting thing that came out this week, and I did not actually realize this, I try to stay pretty well versed on NCAA rules, and this one was actually an interesting surprise to me, is that when he goes on his transfer, technically speaking, or not on his transfer, when he goes on his mission, technically speaking, when he comes back, he's not actually guaranteed. Ohio State isn't guaranteed to have him back. He's kind of like a free agent again. Okay, so even though he will have been at Ohio State, when he comes back, it's almost like because he's not a full-time student anymore, he'll have been gone for 2 years. Technically, Ohio State or any program could re-recruit him. Now, according to he and his family, that's not going to happen. It appears that, they are committed to sticking with Ohio State, so I don't think it's anything to worry about. It's just an interesting procedural issue that kind of comes with the territory here. So theoretically speaking, he could be at Ohio State for all of one semester, go on his mission, and then wind up elsewhere. Now, that's not going to happen. I think he and his family are committed to Ohio State. I think, barring a really bad experience at Ohio State this fall, he's going to come back to Ohio State, and he's going to, he's going to come back to Ohio State and he's going to play football. And he'll have, if he doesn't use a year of eligibility this year, then he'll have all 4 years eligibility when he returns. Another interesting side note here, as far as the rules are concerned, normally with guys, you have, from the time that you enroll as a full-time student in college, you normally have 5 years to play 4 seasons of eligibility. So, and that clock starts as soon as you become a full-time student, with 12 credit hours in a semester or more. That's what defines full-time with the NCAA. But in this case, because the fact that he is leaving on a religious mission, that clock will not tick while he's gone. So he will use up 1 year in the first semester, and then he'll come back and he'll still have 4 years to play for. And by then, he's going to be an older guy and he has NFL aspirations. So if he's good enough, he's probably going to want to be at Ohio State for only 2 or 3 years and then go off to the NFL and hopefully, for his sake, have a really long, successful NFL career. So, Inoke Biamahi from Hawaii signed with Ohio State this week, along with DeJuan Jones, 2 very important gets for Ohio State who were hoping to have 3 or 4 offensive linemen in this class, and they still may pick up a third if you count Jonah Jackson, the grad transfer from Rutgers. So I will skip back to football here. Coming up in the Buckeye Beat, we'll talk a little more about Jeff Hafley and Justin Fields, who was very, like I said, very, very impressive. But I want to talk a little Ohio State basketball here before I get to all that. The Buckeyes did escape Penn State Thursday night, 74-70. And if you saw this game, it looked really, really good early on. Ohio State jumped out. At one point had a 22-1 run and jumped out by 14, 15 points against Penn State in the first half. But then same old recipe for disaster we've seen with Ohio State. Turnovers. And, really there is some encouraging trends to come out of Ohio State in the last few games. We saw Luther Muhammad, who's really picked up his shooting. He's shooting over 50% three-point range in the last 4 or 5 games. He's really stepped up a little bit more consistently as a scorer, which is really good news for Ohio State. Dwayne Washington, who has struggled with flu-like symptoms the last couple of weeks, and then a little bit of confidence, and I think being out of game shape because of the sickness. We saw him, I think, take a baby step forward and returning back to the Dwayne Washington we have seen previously. He came back a little bit into form against Penn State, and I thought that was encouraging. He looked a little bit better. Ohio State, for all intents and purposes, they made the plays that they needed to make, and they won a game against a Penn State team that I know you're going to look at the Big Ten record and say, well, they were 1-10 in the Big Ten. But again, all 10 of their losses came by single digits, 9 points or fewer. So this is a Penn State team that, despite its record, is really, really not a bad team at all. There's no such thing as a bad team in the Big Ten this year. This Penn State team, for whatever reason, has given they gave Ohio State fits last year, obviously, winning all 3 times that they played. This game was a case where, look, this is a decent Penn State team. Again, 9 or all 10 of their losses were by single digits, 11 now if you count this Ohio State game. But Ohio State, despite the fact that Caleb Wesson only scored 3 points in this game and fouled out, I thought the Buckeyes did a really good job in a lot of regards. I thought they defended in the half court really well. A lot of the points that Penn State picked up were really because of the success they had from live ball turnovers by Ohio State. And that's where really, again, the Buckeyes are killing themselves with the turnovers. They have gotten better executing when they're not turning the ball over, which is good. I mean, they're knocking down shots. And look, this is it's a weird dichotomy here because this is an Ohio State team where on the surface, they're an unselfish bunch. They pass the ball pretty well at times, but then they go through these phases where they make such sloppy passes and lethargic passes and just silly, lazy turnovers that they shouldn't make. And it happens so many times against Penn State where they just made careless passes. Where they didn't have any oomph on them, or they just kind of threw the ball lackadaisical without checking to see if the guy was still standing where he was supposed to be. They had a couple entry fees that were just lazy and didn't get to the spot or didn't have enough oomph on them. And these kinds of turnovers are really what's killing Ohio State. Look, they don't have a true point guard. C.J. Jackson's not the greatest ball handler in the world. Keyshawn Woods is a little bit better ball handler than C.J., but he's not the greatest ball handler in the world. Ohio State lacks a true ball handling point guard. But despite all of that, I think the biggest problem is just concentration. It's just not stopping and thinking about what you're doing before you do it. And if they can eliminate, they don't have to cut down to 5 turnovers a game to be really successful. But if they can go from these 18, 19, 20 turnover performances, cut down even 4 or 5 empty possessions in a game, you're talking about a huge difference in efficiency and probably an Ohio State team that instead of being 5-6 in the Big Ten right now, we're talking about, who knows, maybe, 7-4 or 8-3 or something like that. And that really, it doesn't seem like much, but those 4 or 5 possessions, can sometimes amount to 6, 8, 10 points that they're missing out on just because of careless mistakes. And so it's, in a way, it was the same frustrating story for Ohio State on Thursday against the Nittany Lions. But, there were also, outside of the turnovers, which is continuing to be alarming, I thought there were some encouraging signs. Again, half-court defense was good. Most of the Penn State points were coming off of the live ball turnovers and in transition. For the most part, they were doing a good job defending in the half court. Ohio State's offense, when they weren't turning the ball over, I thought they were getting pretty good looks. Penn State did a great job against Caleb Wesson, but Ohio State did a good job on the perimeter and getting mid-range shots in. And I like, and I think that's because of Luther stepping up as a more consistent scoring option, and also Dwayne Washington, which had a pretty good game for him. It wasn't one of his best, but this is the first time we've seen some life from him in really it's been several weeks. So Ohio State will get better. They're running out of time, though. They're going to have to cut down on those careless turnovers within these next couple of weeks because the schedule gets really tough again. They've got a lot of tough road games coming up. So another win for the Buckeyes. They now have Sunday. They go on the road to Indiana, who after picking up a huge win at Michigan State last week, they kind of fell off the horse again, losing to Iowa in Assembly Hall. So that'll be an interesting game. Ohio State needing to go on the road and beat Indiana in Bloomington, and then they will be back home next week against Illinois. So 2 more games that Ohio State has a chance to win. That, if they can do that, that would get them over 500 in the league. They would be 7-6 with a lot of key games coming up down the stretch. So Ohio State Buckeyes back in the winning column again. They are now working on a 2-game win streak and looking for more here this weekend at Indiana.
Stretch runtime here at Unscripted Ohio. Kick up your feet as we cross the finish line with the Buckeye Beat, the latest in Ohio State news and notes.
Kick the tires and light the fires, Big Daddy.
So I mentioned earlier Jeff Hafley and Justin Fields and how really well-spoken they were, both of them. Jeff Hafley, I think, is going to be the next great Ohio State assistant coach. I would say that, Ohio State's going to have a tough time, keeping him because, he's still a young guy. He's a very well-spoken guy. He's a smart individual. And even if he becomes the defensive coordinator in a year or two, if Greg Madison retires, he'll probably take over. The problem is he's going to be on a very, very quick trajectory. So it would not surprise me if he is in the running very soon for a head coaching job somewhere in college. Let's just hope for Ohio State's sake that they get the most of him and enjoy him while you can. It was interesting because he made a couple remarks. I already played the clip at the start of the show with how he feels about teaching defensive backs to, turn and look for the football and make a play on the ball in most situations. And of course, he's talking about in some sections of the field you just can't do that, and that especially goes to the end zone. That's one of the places that Ohio State will probably not be teaching to turn around because the back shoulder fade has really become preeminent. You don't turn around because if you do, you're going to be beat, and that's probably one of the sections of the field he was discussing when he said there are going to be certain times where you don't teach a guy to turn around. But in general, that is going to be something that he mentioned is going to be a huge priority. But I thought it was interesting. I want to play this clip for you because he had an interesting comment about recruiting, and I thought this was really cool to hear. And it kind of reminded me of something because the night he was hired, I remember Mark Gibler on Buckeye Grove posted something that he was really hearing that surprisingly, both when he was at Pitt and when he was at Rutgers, Jeff Hafley was considered an excellent recruiter. He didn't get to do it for a long time before he went off to the NFL. But he really was thought of as a great recruiter. And it's kind of interesting. I want you to hear him compare recruiting versus drafting in the NFL. Hear his thoughts on this.
Well, the recruiting, I think he expects me to go out and get the best players, and that's what I expect out of myself. When I was at Pitt, I did it for a long time. I recruited some really good players. Getting on the road, getting on airplanes and traveling, I had to get used to doing that again. I got a little tired going from city to city, but that's exciting because we don't have to draft them now. We get to go pick them. So I get more than one pick. Coach tells me you get two DBs in this draft. I get more than two DBs now. We get to go evaluate, we get to go pick them. And if we want them, we better work and get them. And that fires me up to give us a chance to do it. And I believe I have the experience with what I've learned over the last 7 years to give a lot to offer these guys.
So I thought that was kind of interesting because he basically talks about, especially with his point about in the NFL, you're going out and you can kind of pick, but you're only picking one or two guys in a given draft. You can't get multiple guys. You just have to draft based on who falls to you at a certain point. But in recruiting, of course, you're still handicapped by the number of players at a certain position, but you're going out and you're basically, if you're good enough, a school like at Ohio State, you can handpick, in some situations, you can handpick the guys that you want most. And I think, with everything we've learned about him so far, with the success he had in a short time at Pittsburgh and the success he had at Rutgers, just listening to him speak and hearing, how jovial a personality he is, how outgoing he is, how smart he is. I think this guy is going to be a dynamite recruiter, and I think he's got the credentials as a great fundamentals coach and a smart mind that could be a great coordinator as well. But this guy, I think, is going to, for however long he's in college, whether he goes, to college as a head coach someplace or goes back to the NFL as a head coach, but for however long he is in college, this guy is going to be a great recruiter. I have no doubt about that. So Justin Fields is the other guy, though, that really made an impression, I thought, in his first appearance as an Ohio State football player. If you didn't get a chance to listen to him speak, go to BuckeyeGrove.com and pull up the news section. You'll be able to see a video. It's about 15 minutes long of Justin Fields speaking to the media this past Wednesday. But look, I've said this before on the podcast, and I want to remind people, Fields is not just a football player. He is a 4.0 student from high school that was an honor student as well. He had Ivy League football offers. He is a really intelligent, well-spoken guy. And so he comes to Ohio State, and you just listen to him talk, and you realize, he's not a dumb jock that transferred out of Georgia because he couldn't cut it, because he couldn't learn the offense, because he was stuck behind Fromm because he didn't want to compete and he wasn't a good player or a smart guy. None of that is true. This is a guy who is a great person. He's a great individual. He's a great football player. He's a good student. He checks all of the boxes for Ohio State. And from the first day that he walks out as Ohio State starter, which I presume will be, in August of this year, because I'm pretty sure he's going to be eligible, and I think we'll find out about that within the next couple of weeks. This is somebody that Ohio State fans are going to want to root for a number of reasons, because it's not just the fact that he can throw a nice ball and he can run and do all that stuff on the field, but he's a great off the field individual. OSU fans have got a lot to be impressed with this kid. And, I think Ohio State is getting a complete winner. This couldn't have been a better pickup for the start of the Ryan Day era. He is like the prototypical absolute best quarterback that Ohio State could have picked up in this situation. And it's really going to be fun to watch his development. But it's great to see not just that he is a talented player, but he really is a good student, good person, great speaker. All of that. It was kind of funny listening to him talk about confidence, going out there and living up to the fans' expectations. He mentioned he didn't realize how big of a rivalry Michigan was until he got here. He complimented the fan base at basketball game against Michigan State that he was in the front row talking to Urban Meyer. He said he was really impressed with the environment there, really impressed with the fan support. This is going to be a two-way relationship. I think Ohio State and Justin Fields, I think, are going to be perfect for one another. Fields is looking to grow as a quarterback and a football player. Ohio State is looking for a good passer and a good player on top of the intangibles. And I think it's a great marriage. I really do. I think it's going to be a perfect fit for both sides, and it'll be a lot of fun watching this develop. So Jeff Hafley, Greg Madison, Justin Fields, of course, Ryan Day having his first Collins show locally in Columbus this week, as well as one of his first full-time media appearances. Really, really a lot of exciting things going on in Ohio State football right now. Should be a fun offseason. Spring football is going to be a lot of fun. That will sneak up on us. It's, hey, look, it's just about two months away till spring football. So get your appetizers right now. And the main course is coming very, very soon. That's going to do it for the Unscripted Ohio podcast today. I will be back on Monday, of course, and we'll talk some more Ohio State basketball, a little more Ohio State football as well. Next Wednesday, Johnny and Corey will be back with the Scarlet and Great podcast. And, of course, I will be back again next Friday. You can listen to Unscripted Ohio every Monday and Friday here on BuckeyeGrove.com, on the archives, SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. And, of course, you can listen to Scarlet and Great every Wednesday here on the Unscripted Ohio Network. Catch me on Twitter at KYLam8. Would love to chat with you. If you want to talk some NBA deadline stuff, the NBA Eastern Conference got really, really good this week as the deadline came and went. The Raptors, Bucks, 76ers all improving their chances greatly with some trades. That should be a lot of fun. But hit me up with anything. NBA talk, NHL talk. With the Blue Jackets made some more. Will they make any deals here at the deadline? Of course, Ohio State football, Ohio State basketball. Whatever your topic of choice, topic of conversation, hit me up, KYLam8. That is going to do it for me. I hope everybody has a great weekend. Go Bucks.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.